We want to now take a look at the investors. So these are the folks behind the curtain, writing the checks, navigating from the boardroom to help these companies be successful and navigate through their challenges. I'm joined by 4 distinguished venture capital investors today. I'm going to say a little bit, and then I'm going to ask them to say a little bit more about what they do and what excites them. Beverly is an investor from Yosemite, which spun out of the Jobs Family Office Emerson Collective. Shen is the managing director of BI Ventures. Mary Claire Peakman is a partner at Pfizer Ventures and executive director of emerging science and innovation at Pfizer. And Dave Greenbaum is vice president of BD at Deerfield and also CEO of Aveco Radiopharmaceuticals, which is a Deerfield portfolio company. So I'm going to ask you guys, starting with Beverly, tell us what you want about your role, what excites you about what you're doing at Yosemite, and what gets you up in the morning.
Can you hear me? That's 4 questions in one.
Yep. I said you were sophisticated venture capital investors. So
all right.
You can do it.
Well, first of all, maybe I will introduce myself very briefly.
Please.
I see a lot of old friends and new friends to be in this room. Very glad to be here. Thanks for the invitations to join. So I probably have the most unconventional. Normally, I'm sitting in a panel for what Ph.D. can do. Is that after my Ph.D. in chemistry, Webb and I share a little bit of this late bloomer in immunology. I went to do my IO postdoc at Harvard. And after that, I went to the pharma side. So both through consulting a bit of a lot of large pharma at McKinsey & Company, and joined one of them. I was at Amgen. I ran the US portfolio from strategy to operations. And now I wear the venture hat at Yosemite. This is a very interesting place. I'll get to what gets me out of bed every day. First of all, Yosemite's North Star is to make cancer non-lethal in our lifetime. I think normally that statement needs some explanation, but not in this room. This is what brought every single one of us together here today. And with that mission, how can I not get out of bed, right? Day to day, Yosemite has a unique structure where we are doing both early stage oncology investments as well as a donor advised fund that gives philanthropic grants. Many of grantees are sitting in the audience here. So my day-to-day varies from chatting with KOLs, mostly consisting me of asking not so smart questions about their new pathways, to helping entrepreneurs and translating medicine. So I think it is both the impactful mission that we're doing as well as the constant learning and contributing to the community gets me out of bed.
That's great. Thank you so much. Faye, tell us about BI Ventures and yourself.
So I will follow the same trend. So my name is Shen, and I'm heading the Boehringer Ingelheim Venture Fund in the US. And by judging by the name, you guys know we are a strategic venture fund for Boehringer Ingelheim, which is the only pharma today is still privately owned by 7 shareholders. I have slightly a little more traditional background for scientists, but not for venture capitalists. When I finished my neuroscience degree, I started my career in a smaller biotech in the Bay Area. Because my training was neuroscience, so I worked in neuroscience for quite a long time. And then later, one thing leads to the other, working in immunology for quite a long time, lead a project into IBD space. Then BI recruited me into research again and work there in multiple different indications, including oncology, immunology, respiratory. 5 years ago, moved into venture fund, which people call the dark side. So when I left the PhD, people say, you go to industry, that's the dark side. And now leaving research, going to venture capital, that's a dark side. But I think what's got me into up the bed every day is get the opportunity. I view our job as being quite privileged. We have the opportunity to work with the most cutting edge scientists in the world. And they're willing to teach us. I always ask very stupid questions. because not by immuno-oncology trained, just like Webb, I don't really know what is NK T cell, what's the gamma delta T cell 15 years ago. So yeah, they are willing to teach us, and they're really open, very open-minded, really shaping the company together with us from the scratch. So our investment strategy is invest into the white space that BI today, they do not work on. We do company formation, 75% of company in our portfolio are company formation from scratch. We have 15 of us globally, and each of us has been working in drug discovery for 15, 20 years. And we are sitting on the board doing quite heavy lifting together with the entrepreneurs. And we're very founder-friendly fund. We do company formation. We don't take your cap seat or a cap table at all. We will continue invest in your company and moving towards clinic and help you exit.
That's great. Thanks. Mary Claire?
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time at this conference. I am privileged to be with such a prestigious group of people, but it's been really nice to see some old friends here and to make some new ones. So I trained originally as a pharmacist and a pharmacologist, did my postdoctoral work at Yale, and then I have been at Pfizer based in Groton, Connecticut for the past 26 and a half years. For the first 23 years of that, I was really in the early small molecule drug discovery space. So I led a number of our platform technology groups that supported all of our small molecule programs going from idea to development candidate for all our different therapeutic areas. So one of the groups that I founded and led has been responsible for abrocitinib and ritlecitinib, which are currently on the market for autoimmune disease, and also for nirmatrelvir, which is better known as Paxlovid. About 3 years ago, I made the switch to join the Pfizer Ventures group. And so I am now a partner in the Pfizer Ventures team looking at external science outside our walls. And our role is to really invest in private companies, similarly to Boehringer, but a little different. Each corporate venture capital group has a little bit of a different flavor to it. And we invest really very much on strategy with our current areas of research focus. So that right now that is oncology, immunology and inflammation, internal medicine, vaccines and anti-infectives. And we like to invest possibly a little closer to what we're doing internally, but I like to say immediately adjacent to the work that we're doing internally. And what I really like about that is that I can use my network at Pfizer that I have built over the past 25 years to bring those scientists in to do due diligence on the companies and on the targets and the programs that we're looking at without actually having a direct conflict of interest in anything that we're doing internally. So similar to BI, our primary goal is strategic. Our ideal investment and opportunity to build a relationship with a company would be to build a relationship with somebody that could potentially add to Pfizer's pipeline in the future, so could potentially be substrate for a future business development deal, either a license, an option deal, or an M&A. But our secondary goal is a financial return. So if it gets to the point where that program or asset is no longer on strategy for Pfizer, or Pfizer fails to win the bid, then we like to have a financial return for the organization because it helps with our internal narrative. We often lead, we will co-lead, we will follow in an investment. I would say our sweet spot is around a Series A. We can go a little bit earlier, but it's really helpful for us to have something approaching a development candidate or lead optimization, because one of the things that's important for us is that we get internal championship for our investments. And so the CSO for the relevant therapeutic area, so in this case it would be the CSO of our oncology group, Jeff Settleman, who I'm sure some of you know, would be on the investment committee to approve our investment into the company. And so it's very much easier when we have a narrative around a lead asset or a program that the company is really developing. We like to stay actively involved with the companies that we work with, so we do take a role on the board of directors because that helps to build the relationship. It helps us to always be able to make introductions across Pfizer at the right time, to keep them in touch with our scientists, and to ensure that we provide the right sort of guidance and strategic sort of input to the company as it's growing. So to what gets me out of bed, I love this job. I mean, I've been privileged to have many jobs that I've loved at Pfizer, but I really love this job. I love the science. I love the fact that I get to meet so many great people, case in point. And I think what gets me out of bed with this role particularly is that I feel that every single day, every single decision I make has the potential to have impact. And I guess that was true when I was leading large groups, but now I have no direct reports. I get the chance to open an email, look at a slide deck that's come in, spend time learning the science, go to the literature, read it, do the due diligence. And if I make the choice to do that, it is giving that idea a chance to fly. And I feel that every slide deck I look at, every company that I talk to, whether I make a decision to move forward or not move forward, it has impact for that company, for Pfizer, and for the patients in the future. So that's why I love it.
I was going to ask you if this is your best job at Pfizer, but you've answered that question pretty much on the head. Dave, let's hear from you.
Thanks, Matt. So Dave Greenwald, I lead business development at Deerfield Management and currently CEO of one of our portfolio companies in the radiation oncology space. Personal background is Ph.D. scientist by training from Tufts and several time serial entrepreneur. Spent about 5.5 years at Johns Hopkins Tech Ventures doing deals between academia and industry and have been at Deerfield for about 6 years. So my whole career has really been focused around getting things out of academia and towards patients. A little bit about Deerfield. We're a healthcare-focused investment firm. We manage about $15 billion based in New York for the last 30 years. And we invest very broadly in healthcare. So we invest in medical devices, we invest in therapeutics, and we invest in healthcare services, which is really anything that touches healthcare that's not a drug or a device. We invest in all modalities, all therapeutic areas, and at all stages. So we're happy to look at everything. We do have preferences. About a third of our portfolio is oncology focused, but we do everything from sponsoring research in academia to starting new companies like Avico. We do traditional venture capital, Series A, Series B, private equity, crossovers, IPOs, and public investing as well. So really happy to be here.
That's great. No, thanks, Dave. We're gonna unpack a little bit of the interface between and venture as you discussed as we get deeper into the conversation. Just wanted to make sure that the folks in the audience appreciate that we have actually intentionally gathered investors from different backgrounds that have, like in the case of large institutional investor, 2 different examples of corporate venture arms. And Mary Claire, you spoke to this about the alignment with Pfizer and how that enables you. And I think, Faye, what's interesting, I wanted you to maybe speak to a little bit more, is that BI Ventures is kind of uniquely autonomous in a way, but you're still drawing upon BI's reputation and capabilities. Can you say a bit about how that enables you to, I think, do a lot more company formation than you typically see from a corporate venture group?
Yeah, so we have complete autonomy, like you said, from our farmer, but we do not have autonomy from our corporate. Our setup is more similar to the Novo Venture setup. We are reporting all the way into corporate, which means when we're looking for a deal, we do not need an internal champion at all. The reason is we are not looking for immediately complementarity with our current portfolio. We're looking for 10 years from now. We're looking into 2035 right now, the disease map. So 15 years ago, we will invest in CD3 engagers, ADCs. But today, our parent company already doing that. They don't need us to do that for company formation. These will be our BD. I mean, we talk to BD all the time as well, but more for referral. If it's things out their scope, but still something we believe our corporate will go into in 10, 15 years, they refer to me. If you're coming to us and I feel it's more fit for BD, I will refer you to our head of BD. So we work quite synergistically and go out to look at for immuno-oncology, for example, the state. So today, our immuno-oncology state we're looking for is regenerative for the T-cell repertoire. I heard today a lot of companies are presenting a signal to the body, neoantigen play. We have different way of activating, presenting to our T-cell. But we find the white space. I give you an example because I feel very few people are doing regenerating the T-cell repertoire when we're getting older, because our T-cell repertoire is diminishing. It's more skewed towards memory cell, as we heard earlier. So how we really solving this problem? So that where we will intentionally talking to all the academic center and finding academic people focus on that area, and we'll help them spin their company out from their academics, etc. And just like MC's comment, we will take a board seat. We will continue infuse capital into the company and also help the company build a network, leverage on the network we already have in the industry, in the KOL center to help the company towards success.
That's great.
So very different.
No, that's great. I want to talk a little bit more. Maybe I'll direct this at Beverly initially, but others should comment. For our entrepreneurs in the audience, can you talk a little bit about, from your perspective, especially when you're looking at an early investment opportunity, it might even be a company concept or a seed stage company, what is that sort of seed or that nugget of value or innovation that the founders and the entrepreneurs in the company must bring to the table? So something that you as the investor can't source from elsewhere, you can't coach the team on, you can't outsource to a consultant. What is, in your view, and maybe different views from the different panelists, what is that prime mover element that entrepreneurs should be focused on making sure they have and highlighting when they speak to investors?
That's a very good question. Well, first of all, because I get why you asked me that question, because we do quite a bit of company creation, and I would say that seeding actually begins way before that. That is because I introduced a little bit about our granting, truly no strings attached, philanthropic granting that we've been doing for the past decade or so. And a lot of the ideas generation actually comes from that. And we try to talk to our grantees and like entrepreneurs from the earliest possible inception time about how to shape it into that storytelling ultimately is the question that you're asking me right now. And I often think about this in sort of three dimensions. One is what, the second is how, the third is when. And I think this is a good framework that I find beneficial in working both with academics as well as entrepreneurs. I think I'll unpack a little bit and then love the others to chime in. The what part, I think a lot of us feel like we get it because that's our bread and butter technology. We really get the science down. But I think it's in the nuance of prioritization, especially in the world of today. If you have a platform and many assets, how do you prioritize in the resource constraint? Even in the lab setting, what do you spend into a company? Even after company formation, what program do you prioritize? And by the time you're raising seed or A, what's your story? Are you a platform company? Are you an asset company? The answer is not either or. It's actually great, multiple shots on goal. Then does your asset validate your platform? So I hope I'm starting to answer your question. And then the how dimension, there are many different aspects of coming out of academia into biotech space. And then even within the biotech space, sort of how do you do fundraising? And I'll get into the when and what sources of that. I'm sure we're gonna get into it, so I'm not gonna jump. And then the when part, I find a lot of people in the past, I feel like we're gotten so much more sophisticated in the past 5-10 years, is that when do you translate, when is the right time to spin off a company? Sometimes too early is not a good thing. We've seen a lot of technology die that way. It hurts every time here. And same thing with a startup. When do you go out to fundraise? I've chatted with a lot of CEOs here and also my portfolio company. Fundraising never ends. So it never really ends. And when do you talk to, who do you talk to? What is the true multi-source fundraising at this moment in time?
MC, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Beverly said. Great answer. I'll tell you the things that we look for when we're looking at new companies, and it comes back to the same two things that I said I love, the science and the people. Science, innovative science is what calls us at the very outset. Don't need to speak much about that to the people in this room, but all of the Pfizer Ventures team are originally Ph.D. scientists and come at it from the scientific perspective. And it has to have the strategic alignment. So I mentioned that we want to see that it's sort of complementary to some of the work that we're doing internally, and that we have some expertise in that space to potentially guide and help move things forward in the future. And then it comes down to the people. So we look for top-tier founders from top-tier institutions, founders who are well-published, whose data is reproducible, who have strong credibility across the scientific community. And then we look for strong syndicate. We come in and partner with other groups. We found, in actual, Beverly and I are together on a board. I think we work together with other strategics in many of our investments, because that helps us to de-risk the science, because we're actually leveraging the financial investment from multiple different sources. So we look for other similarly minded life science investors. They're not all corporate. It's nice. I actually prefer to have a balance of corporate and traditional financial investors, because you bring that diversity of agenda to the table, and so you generally have some really good debates about how best to move forward. But we like to see people who understand the drug discovery continuum and cycle. It's got to be people who are patient enough to wait for that whole drug discovery cycle, and who are not looking to move in and move out within a couple of years, and are expecting financial exits within a couple of years, because that makes the board very misaligned with corporate, with the management team. And then we look to see an experienced management team. So most often there will be people on that management team who have been in other successful biotechs previously. We have got some great examples of first-time CEOs, but they're always surrounded by people who have experience and can guide them in the right space. So I guess that's just a slightly different flavor to what Beverly said.
That's wonderful. Dave, let's take this specifically through the lens of looking at the interface between academics and venture capital. So when you were at Johns Hopkins, as you mentioned, you did actually, I think, one of the first deal from the Hopkins side with Deerfield, and then went on and have done a number of sort of setting up outposts at academic centers. Can you say a bit about, what's worked well, and maybe what has been, something that as a community we can improve at that interface?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. So by way of background, Deerfield has 29 large-scale academic collaborations. So we've partnered with 28 institutions in the US and the Weizmann Institute in Israel. And the model here is that we sponsor research focused on therapeutics. And then if that's successful, we can then spin it out into a new company, or license it to a company like Pfizer or Boehringer, or we can put it into one of our existing portfolio companies. So we like optionality. And for us, it really starts with, the novelty of the science. We don't necessarily want to be the 10th program chasing the same target as everybody else, unless it's really differentiated. So I think from our perspective, though, collaborating with top academic centers has been a very fruitful source of innovation for Deerfield. We have our own ideas, and we can start companies based on those ideas, but I think tapping into the academic network has been great. Matt, to your question, what's worked well, what can we do better? I'll start with what's worked well. Novelty of targets is great. Having close relationships with the universities and being what we hope is some of the first to know. We like to try to be a really good partner, so people want to come to us with their projects. Knowing about targets early on, I think, is a competitive advantage from our perspective. There have been some projects where the science, hasn't reproduced past the initial experiments, and we love it when the PIs will be the first to say, "Hey, look, I don't think this is working. We should probably wind this down. I know we had planned for 18 months of work, but we're not feeling the same level of conviction that we initially had." So that has happened on a couple occasions, and I will say that with our view is that those are the types of PIs who kind of bring the intellectual honesty that we want to work with again. So I think those are some things that have worked well. In terms of things that haven't worked well, there's challenges around publications, right? There's a little bit of a friction. We're very supportive of academics applying for grants and publishing. There does come a point at which you want to protect the intellectual property, and you want to do that before you publish. You don't want to have invested millions of dollars into a program and then have an academic who wants to publish, and we understand that, jeopardize those IP rights. Sometimes, PIs can want to do an experiment, might not add, we might not agree with it. We try to resolve that. Sometimes they've gone ahead and done those experiments, and so that's a little bit challenging as well. So I think over the last, I guess we've been doing this now for 6 years. The Hopkins collaboration was the second one. The first was with the Broad. We've learned, I think, how to get better at it. I think we probably, 85% got it right at the beginning. I think now we're even higher. I think from our side, we try to be a good partner, right? We understand the need to publish, the need to apply for grants. We hope we can add value. We have a team of 40 in-house drug developers who try to complement the expertise of the academicians. But yeah, it's a continuous process, and we try to have an open dialogue. We try to have a presence on campus. But it's been so far, I think it's been a really good relationship. And the proof is kind of in the pudding, right? We've had, I guess, 2 or 3 programs now that we funded that have gone on to either start companies or go into existing companies. And the first program, which is a gene therapy, will be entering the clinic in the next 2 months. So, we're excited that this is yielding fruit, but it is hard and challenging, and it's been a good journey along.
That's great. That's great. Faye, you noted that I think you said 3/4 of the companies you're invested in are things that you were involved in creating the companies. Does that resonate with you in terms of what you're seeing at that point of company formation?
Yeah, so I think it's to do with a couple of things, right? One thing is we want to see for future. So often the science and technology often are, for the white space creation, is not that mature yet. So that's why we have to go very early, to go to academic center, to talk to tech transfer office. We will help them to negotiate the license out from their tech transfer office. We understand that it's a little bit conflict of interest there. And also to do with talent, 15 of us globally, we're all from R&D. We don't have clinical design people in our team. So I think when we designed our team 15 years ago, we agreed we will do company formation, see the lead, and we staffed our team that way. And we often, going back to the early question you asked, what make us think it's a good team? I think it's only really one factor. Are you open-minded? I think the trust can only be established when people are open-minded. And the doing company actually is quite difficult. There are many things can fail. If company, when they wind down, I want to wind down because the science tests a hypothesis. The hypothesis did not test out. That's normal, that's what we do. But I don't want company fail because human people, self-consuming, have other reasons to make company fail. So I think the trust with open-mindedness is something I look for when I start a company.
That's great. So we've got 20 minutes left of the panel. I promised our panelists that we would play a little game because it's the end of the session today. We're going to try an experiment. So this is called overrated or underrated. Some of you may have heard of this. I'm going to read a statement from the point of view of an actor in our community, and then I'm just going to get a volunteer for each one, and maybe somebody will represent both positions. Overrated means this is a cliche statement, people are exaggerating it, we hear it too often. Underrated means, no, this is really an important perspective, people need to pay more attention to it, okay? And it's gonna be first come, first serve. So from the point of view of an investor, there are too many companies working on the same therapeutic target without a differentiated approach. Is that overrated or is that underrated? Dave?
Underrated.
Okay.
I said it earlier on, so I have to stick with my position.
Defend it.
Unless it's highly differentiated, there's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of unmet need. It pains me to see what we call therapeutic density, which is 15 companies going after the same target for the same disease. It's like there's better uses of capital. There's better uses of human resources. So I would say underrated.
Underrated? Anyone want to take the overrated position? Or agree? You can agree.
It's got to be differentiated.
Okay.
I'm glad to see a lot of people tackling the tough targets that are well validated that we've failed at in the past. The ones where we really believe there is a link to cancer progression in this particular thing. But it has to be different. It has to be tackling. a different kind of modality, a different area of chemistry space, a different mechanism of action. And that's one of the reasons I got into this space, because I don't think we do that well in large pharma. I don't think we, in all the 23 years where we were working on early drug discovery, all small molecules, I do confess, but when we wanted to do something differently, we would just put 5 people on it, and then we'd wait for 2 years, and we'd expect a development candidate out of it. And then if we didn't get one, we'd say, oh, well, that doesn't work. We'll move on to something else. And so that's why I think the biotech space and particularly close collaborations with academics who've spent a long time thinking about a particular disease area is the way to go. But yes, I've sidetracked us. I'm sorry. It's got to be differentiated.
No, that's great. That's great. Good. Okay, let's go to the next one. So this is from the perspective of a preclinical entrepreneur working in a seed stage company. And bemoaning the current situation post-pandemic. No VCs want to invest in my seed stage super innovative idea because they all want assets that are either in the clinic or 12 months away from IND. Is this a real issue right now? Or
Well,
Beverly?
I think it's overrated, especially in my case. I only do company creation seed and A. So I would do, as early as early clinical proof of concept. That's sort of the bread and butter of our mission. So I'm definitely outside of that circle that this statement is talking about. I think there are a lot of exciting science going on, and this refers back to your first question. I agree with what everybody says, but I think devil lives in the details. It's not about a target that's well researched or already launched drugs, then that target is dead. It's more about how do you target it? How do you target differently? Is that differentiation? I think there's a lot of exciting early science, and we're certainly very active in that.
So I actually think it's a little underrated, opposite from you. Even I am also still only do company formation seed lead. That's everything we do. But we have to syndicate, like I think all the strategic venture funds, we all have to syndicate. The reason is we cannot have majority of a company because that will cause a consolidation issue for us in the US as a corporate. So I always looking for syndicate, but I feel 3 years ago when I do syndicate, things are very different from today. These couple of years what I hear is, oh, we all want to do clinic. We don't want to do so early. This is high risk. And they rightly say so has a reason, because every company right now is doing down round. They say, if I put money in the early, it's 2 years later, somebody gonna give me a down round. Why I want to put money in the early? I want to go to the, right now, and also the clinical stage are cheap. So for the same money, I just buy clinical stuff, de-risk it. So I think at this moment, even we are still doing company formation, I will do seed, but I think it's much, much harder to find a syndicate come with me.
I would agree it's hard to syndicate right now. It's very slow to pull around together. I have done 2. Having said that Series A is our sweet spot, we can go earlier, and I have done 2 that are very early. The second one, which was just closed at the beginning of this year, took a long time to bring the syndicate together. And I think a lot of traditional venture capital groups are really holding their money for their favorite companies. And so it's just getting harder to get them into something new because there's less of a narrative around it.
Okay. So the bar is higher for
I think so.
Innovative early stage. Okay.
Yeah.
One more of these, and it's a little bit off where we are from now, but we're in Washington, D.C., we're in the National Press Club, I have to do it. From the perspective of a big pharma lobbyist, government intervention in drug pricing is harmful to innovation. So the context, is it? It's a question mark at the end. So the context there, just for is there's a lot of talk about a shift from small molecules to biologics because of drug pricing that's impacting, and maybe MC, you can start us off because we were chatting about this last night.
Yeah, so
is this a real phenomenon?
Yeah, so we've definitely said publicly from our oncology group that we will shift to a much larger portfolio in the biologic space versus small molecule. And of course, I came from the small molecule side, so that's all I've really known. Many years of structure-based drug design and kinase inhibitors. So I definitely see that shift in the in the internal research groups. I haven't yet seen it really impact us as we're assessing a company, because as we were saying last night, we don't have that much choice, right? There are so many criteria which we're looking for in terms of the innovative science, the people, the team. We don't necessarily get to say, and we also want it to be a biologic as opposed to a small molecule. There are pros and cons. For a biotech, it's much faster to get to a development candidate, typically with a biological approach. The sort of complexity and the cost comes later on with the manufacture. So I haven't really seen it affect us, and I'm interested to learn if it's affecting other people's investment theses right now, because I think it will come to us, because it's definitely a conversation across all of the big pharma right now. How about you?
Dave?
Sure, yeah, so I'll comment on this. I'll first say that these are my personal views, that doesn't reflect Deerfield or any of our, it probably goes for everyone on this panel. And I'll actually try to play both sides of this. So I understand, like my view here personally is that I think that the legislatures are trying to do the right thing, right? They're trying to lower prices for everyday Americans. And I think that's like laudable. Like it or not, we live in a capitalist society, and the only way that an investment is going to be made where the likelihood of success is less than 5%, and that money is going to be tied up for over 10 years, is if there's a chance for it to be a billion-dollar molecule on the other side. So, that being said, we need to have incentives for early-stage investment. And I'll use an example, not in the oncology space, but I'll actually talk about gene therapy for a moment. When Zolgensma was approved, and this is a life-saving drug for spinal muscle atrophy, these are babies who don't live past their second year. It was priced at $2.25 million. And at the time, it was the most expensive drug in the world. Very easy for politicians to point to that and say, this is terrible. Can you imagine? Now, what is not communicated, I'll kind of bring it back to our industry. I think that our industry does a terrible job communicating this. Not only the amount of investment that it took to get that drug approved, but what the cost of caring for those patients without this drug is. It's closer to $5 million. It's never talked about. So the way that drugs are often priced is to say, look, this actually is providing a benefit, and even though it's expensive, it's actually a net positive for the healthcare system. So it's a very complicated issue. My personal view on it, though, is that I think that we should have a free market, and that we should be able to price drugs where you can recoup the investment. Maybe I'll stop there because I think
that's great. That's great. Stop there. If you want to talk to Dave more after we have the reception, then he can say more about it. That'd be great.
I'm going to have to leave DC right
that's
after
right.
this. So.
We got the helicopter warming up outside for you, Dave. Just one more on this topic. Faye, you as I understand it, you position a lot of your early stage programs around small molecule and pre-DC nomination. So you're obviously still very focused in the small molecule space. Is this a lens through which you guys are looking at things, or?
So we're modality agnostic. So we have invested in bacteria delivering to solid tumor for oncolytic vaccine. So for our investment is completely modality agnostic. So that's number one. But we take a slightly different view. So I think overall, answer your question, I do think it will kill innovation long term. Right now, I think just starting, people are talking a lot. But also like big pharma, we are a large train. It's very hard to change directions. BI and Pfizer, we're very good at small molecule. We have a huge medicinal chemistry group, very strong. Our blockbuster mostly are made internally by our medicinal chemists. So with all these very robust team there, it's very hard to switch in the talent and immediately now let's do antibody. We do have also a lot of antibody as well, but internally it's much harder to take on new modalities. However, venture fund is a little different. As I said, our setup's very autonomy. We don't take from balance sheet. We're evergreen setup. So we're every decision is made within 15 of us ourselves. So we are thinking of small molecule, what's a long-term look like. If it's one target and it really can go to multiple indications, how we really gain market access in the most reasonable will not get impacted by IRA. So we actually, for investment team, we do consider the IRA much more severely.
Okay, great. We have some time. Is there 1 or 2 or 3 questions from the audience? I can sort of see, yes. Can we get some microphones over there? And if you could make the questions directed, and we'll try to get some more discussion going here.
Thank you very much. A very, very interesting discussion. So I did several years company creation, investment, and all that. But most of my career is more on the biotech, so the other side, fundraising. So I have a general question. So I think it's fair to say 3 years ago or so, you name mRNA, you name gene therapy. I mean, all the investors are after you, right? So now the situation is very, very different. So my question is for small company to start up. When we approach to investor, they always say, do you have a clinical data? I want a clinical POC. Well, I'm just starting up. Now they want innovation some years ago, but now it's like everything has to be de-risked, right? So you also mentioned that it's been hard getting syndicating fund. I heard from many other VC friends, by investing the seed stage, they don't get their money back much. I don't know if you guys agree. You know, often you spend a couple $1 million, you put in a lot of effort to work with the founder's company. You know, a couple years later, the valuation does not go up very much. So today's, conference is wonderful talking about innovation, cutting edge. How do you see this go if nobody's supporting the really early stage discovery, very innovation? I mean, no clinical data, obviously, yeah. Right? And how do you see this is going? Do you think we're getting better? Number 2, what advice would you give the small biotech who are in that situation? Got a very novel technology. I don't have clinical data. It's novel, so it has risk, right? It may not translate. So one, that's how great. You guys think of it will be better, and your perspective, how you are handling it without being able to find a syndicate. Second, now, how would you advise us?
Let's go to you, right, for the advice, the part 2.
I won't say advice, but my personal view. I think the venture community is sometimes, I would say subsets of them are quite reactive. They're not proactive. So think about if today nobody go into the early asset, innovative, true innovations. In 3 years, we don't have development candidate either. Because it takes time to grow there, right? And today you see all 4 of us, we are all actually doing relatively early assets. And also I want to caution in this time, right? It's difficult, but you don't want investors in your boardroom have very different mindset from you. They want to flip. These are flipper ones. They buy cheap, they try to flip you very quickly in 2 or 3 years in the other end. Do you want really these investors in your boardroom? So I would say still finding similar mindset investor, like your management team, really is the goal to creating medicines that make a difference. Yes, we all venture capitalists. We prefer not to lose money, but I think that what's the priority is still making a medicine that makes a difference for us.
That's great.
Exactly. Let me chime in real quick. Very much agree with what Fei just said, and also just to point out, underscore that point is that our investment strategy at Yosemite hasn't changed, whether it's at the height of the market in 2020 and 2021 versus today. And let me give you this answer. That's because our North Star is always patient. And we all know that, right? But you have to break it down and see what it means, right? So how do you generate patient impact by the time your drug launches? That's the question. If you break that down furthermore, what it means is that do you address a large enough patient population, not to say rare and small populations no-go. I'm just saying in terms of, and on those scale, then you look at unmet need. I often find for early founders, they're solving the sort of the wrong question. I think Fei is trying to indicate that. Let me turn the problem on its head. Instead of thinking about what investors want, think about what patients want by the time you will launch your drug. And what that means is that you will need to understand the evolving treatment landscape in about 7 years or so. And when you can explain that to me very clearly, which patient population, what are the other modalities and suspected standard of care by that time, we'll invest.
That's great. We got, are we
So-
over? Oh, okay.
So, Michael Saugeller from NIH. I'm not going to comment on drug pricing, or else Dave and I could race each other out of town. But it has, the question keeps coming up every time we're approached by a company as a possible partner. So, at NIH, we're not permitted to spin out companies, unfortunately. So, therefore, we have to garner interest from, say, an entrepreneur and investors they know to hopefully form new cos around our assets. So given that, for a lot of diseases, especially cancer, the U.S. is the 800-pound gorilla as far as the market size. But even given that, I appreciate your opinion on filing in China. If you see a company, how important, not important, somewhat important, et cetera, if you see that they have patent rights in China. I hear lots of different things. I'd love your viewpoint.
Dave, you want to take that one? This is a big topic we could get into, but maybe the specific answer.
I'm very interested to hear the corporate view on this.
Okay.
From the purely financial view, I would say we focus mostly on the U.S., EU, and Japan. That's probably the most succinct way to put it.
So just can I clarify, are you talking about whether we were interested in investing in companies in China, or
I think-
taking...
Listing in technology IP that has not
Filed the patent, I think he's saying. So is there also, and maybe we can broaden that to say, is there intent to commercialize in China, or would ex-China rights, and I think because this taps into a pretty prevalent theme right now, are big pharma companies and thus venture capital investors excited about ex-China rights, or are we talking global rights?
For me, it had to be global rights.
Global. You
If
got one
it's
vote for global.
China carved out, I think for a subset farmer, we will have difficulty to in-licensing such, I'll buy this company.
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that from Pfizer's perspective, and I think it might be somewhat dependent on the disease area and the asset. So I can't give you a straight answer. I'd have to get back to you on that one. I know that we are interested, many of our portfolio companies consider, licensing out China rights. I know that we are interested in investing in the innovation in China and potentially taking assets out of China when that's appropriate. But I don't know if I've got the exact answer to your question, I'm sorry.
That's great. One more question right here? Or two more?
So, this is not a fair question, but I'll ask it anyway. So in academia, we have organized our science in such a way, siloed mostly, even now, where, if you are innovative and you have a new idea, it's usually rejected. I mean, it takes a while for it to bubble up. So my question is, we talk about innovation all the time. It's we have directors and vice presidents of innovation, and all this sort of thing has matured in some ways. But how do you know? I mean, when you look at a new company and you're looking for innovation, what are you looking for? And how do you know? I mean, is it just a gut feeling, or there's a fine line between, innovation and insanity? So, how do you know, and how can we be assured, if you're our VC, that you're going to understand that we are the most innovative company on the planet? What is it that's so special?
That is a hard question.
So
Yeah.
for me, I will say, like your three, when and what. So for me is the why. I think the how we trust you guys. You guys are the KOL in that field. Studied this for 20, 30 years. How to make that happen? We trust. We will, before each investment, we'll read every single other paper you have published. So the how is usually pretty solid. If the why is innovation enough, so why we do this is different from what already being done in the standard of care, that I think will draw my attention. So the value proposition on why had to be squeaky clear for me.
Very similar. So to my earlier answer too, is that would this make a difference for patients in about 7 to 10 years? That's my number one filter. If the answer is yes, then we talk about the feasibility, which is very important, as Anna, you know. So the feasibility part, then that becomes, is this intrinsic to the technology? Is technology not gonna work out? Then that's sort of a no-go decision. However, if the technology has a reasonable path, then the how part to Faith's question, to Faith's point, it's somewhat solvable problem, and we're not afraid of that.
It's interesting, but I think the VC community is taking a bigger role in the whole development of the whole biomedical enterprise now. I mean, it is. You don't recognize it yet, maybe, but you're making investments that other people are not making because we are not far enough advanced to know, especially out of academia right now, you know, when we should be investing more, or when you have proof of concept. I think, Beverly, you made the comment, we need more VCs who are willing to put money into proof of concept.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to close this out before I thank our panelists. Sorry, okay,
if
you have one more
mind.
question. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, I was very surprised. So it's Ignacio from .bio. I'm flying in from Singapore. I was very surprised to see BI Ventures investing in like projects that are maybe 15 years down the line. We're working on intercellular antibodies. That's an area that's quite exciting. My question is, what are the areas that you guys are looking on, you know, that excites you, that you see as the future, that perhaps we're not talking about right now, but are up and coming? Thank you.
Can we get one from everybody? Maybe just one area, even though you have a lot of exciting areas, but just for time's sake. Dave, let's start with you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so we're very involved in oncology and specifically radiation oncology. There's a technology called boron neutron capture therapy that's approved in Japan, and we are trying to bring it to the United States. The response rates in head and neck cancer go from like 15 to 20% up to 71%. So really transformational, and that to us, I think the question about innovation, like to us, having studied the field for a long time, when we came across this technology, we knew it when we saw it because we had been studying the field for so long. So that's an example of something that we're very excited about.
That's great.
Yeah, I would say an example of some of the work that we've talked about today, in the ADC space particularly, I'd like to see novel mechanisms to improve that therapeutic window, to improve the safety and tolerability. And the protein degraders, proximity-inducing mechanisms, molecular glues, I think that's still a space. We've got a number of investments in that space. I think it's still a space that we're excited in developing further.
Great. Faye?
And for us, I already alluded to earlier, we are very interested in recreate a diverse, naive T-cell repertoire when in the elderly patient population.
Yeah, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. If you think you have a chance of creating a step change in patient's life, you know, we are one of the first movers in cancer early detection, first movers in T-cell exhaustion, first movers in epigenetic editing. We're not afraid of dreaming big for patients.
That's great. So let's close out with one more while we're going down the line, one more lightning round. We've just had, we do have another question? Okay. I thought you guys were telling me we've done 6 minutes ago. Okay, let's do it. Sujan just gave us 10 extra minutes. Go for it. Thank you, Sujan. Beverly, you want to start?
I also think that's perhaps the hardest question being asked today. I'm going to turn this into the one-word rapid round that we're going to do. How's that? Because we're going to cover it, I think. Yeah, team? I have the benefit of a lower bar, so being collaborative is because what I found in CEO is that there's not a single person so far that can cover all the grounds at all stages of the company. And oftentimes we see that early stage CEOs to later stage CEO commercialize, like CEOs are different people. So it's not realistic to have one phenotype that fits all. What that means is that person should be able to work really well across team and be able to learn from anybody.
So for me, it's just like every drug has therapeutic window. Every person also has therapeutic window. I think collaborative, open-mindedness is my efficacy. Ego is my side effect. So you need to have a very large therapeutic window for me to work with.
High integrity, obviously. I think a real transparency and honesty with the board, the company, as a representative of the company. I was working with a company just this summer, and we were ready to put a bridge round in, and literally the day before we wired, they put it on hold because they got some negative data out of an animal model. And all the money was ready to wire, all the documents had been signed, and the CEO himself came back and said, let's just put this on hold because we're not 100% sure now. Let's wait and see what the next set of data shows. And it did, it sort of set the company back a little bit. They weren't desperate for the money, so it wasn't like a huge concern from an employee perspective, but it gave us the time to sit and discuss as a board, wait for the next set of data to come out. We had another conversation at the board meeting, and then we finally went ahead with the investment into the round. But I really appreciated that he basically picked up the phone and said, let's just put this on hold. And there was a number of, multi-million dollars coming into the company, and he could have just let it slide and then given us the update after it had gone in. And he didn't do that. And that, to me, was a sign of a really good CEO.
That's great, Dave.
Yeah, that's good. So I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of CEOs, and I'll kind of just repeat a couple things, but I believe them. I think that there's a variety of phenotypes and personalities that can work. It'd be nice to be collaborative. It'd be nice to be, all these things. I think the only thing that's a real deal breaker is honesty. So, I think I've worked with CEOs where I personally don't think, that they're pleasant to work with, but at the same time, like, they're very results driven and they get it done, and it's kind of, there's a range. I think so. Honesty is the only thing that I think really is just an absolute deal breaker, and I think that's reflected a bit in some of the other responses.
That's great. Well, let's thank our panelists again. Thank the audience for great questions.